My name is Nora Lenz, and I'll just show the book that I wrote about 20 years ago. It's called Rotational Monofeeding, and it's about the proper feeding of dogs. There's a little bit of information about cats, and basically what it does is it shifts the paradigm away from waiting for disease to happen, causing disease with the way we feed animals every day, and then dealing with effects or symptoms by suppressing them, to one of meeting an animal's biological needs so they don't become diseased in the first place. Okay, so the fundamental problem, as I see it, the big problem is dog and cat sickness. And I have developed three main contributing factors for dog and cat sickness. And the first, what I call the first contributing factor, is the business model that is followed by the agricultural animal industry. And that's because the aim of every farmer or rancher that raises animals is to get these animals as heavy and large as quickly as possible. There is an enormous incentive for creating obesity in agricultural animals because these producers, these original producers of the animals that raise the animals, they are paid just as much for fat and bone as they are for lean tissue. They are paid for hanging weight. After the carcass is weighed and these original producers are paid, everything shifts, of course, and the lean tissue becomes very valuable because that's what we humans want to eat. And the producers not only profit from having the animal weigh a lot, but the fat that is put on the animal actually adds value in other ways as well, because producers are rewarded for having marbling in the lean tissue. It moves their product up into a higher grade if it has this marbling that is desired by human consumers. And that marbling cannot be achieved without also producing a lot of waste fat, or what the industry considers waste fat, and that is the subcutaneous fat and the fat that is stored elsewhere on the animal's body. It is at that point, after the animal's killed and the producer is paid, it becomes pretty much worthless, except for its functional value, which it had while it was on the animal. Because while it's on the animal, this subcutaneous fat protects this lean tissue investment from bruising while the animals are being transported and slaughtered, because they go through a lot of being knocked around while that process is happening. And there is a lot of money invested in that very valuable lean tissue that lies underneath that subcutaneous fat. So once the animal is killed and out the door, the whole dynamic shifts and the fat becomes nearly worthless while the lean tissue goes in the other direction. That was the point of the whole endeavor. After all, it's very valuable. So in order to remain viable, these businesses that deal in the animal flesh, once the animal is killed, they have to find a lucrative way to dispose of all of these unwanted fatty parts of the animals. And as it turns out, that's most of the animal. What we want is actually a very small part. We only want the lean tissue, right? What else do we eat? That's pretty much it. A few of the organs, maybe. But this remainder, this huge amount that is the remainder, is available for use by pet food processors. And guess what? It's practically free. It's very, very cheap. And it is much, much fattier than dogs and cats are adapted to consume. The animals that dogs and cats have evolutionarily adapted to consume are very lean. They are extremely lean. They are lithe. They are athletes. And what that means is that the cats and dogs out in nature that chase those animals, that predate on those animals, have to be the same way. And that's the model, right? But diverting from all of that is what produces disease. And this leads to contributing factor number 2, and that is veterinary medicine. So the second contributing factor is the creation of the illusion that sickness can be disappeared. You know, when sometimes when we talk about people being murdered and we never find their bodies, it's, you know, they've been disappeared. Well, that's what the vet industry pretends to do with sickness. And like I was just explaining the reason why eating fatty animal parts creates disease in dogs and cats is because nature doesn't do things the way the animal agriculture industry does. It would be extremely costly. It would be suicidal, in fact, for a wild animal to carry anywhere near as much fat on their bodies as an agricultural animal. These animals must remain lean and live in order to escape predation. Like I said, they're athletes, and that means that the predator must be a super athlete. That is the legacy of our dogs and cats, like it or not. So instead of very lean animals that ate what they were adapted to eat, so wild animals eat a completely different diet than agricultural animals. Our pet animals are eating animals that are raised in very unnatural circumstances. And this produces disease. And this problem of dog and cat sickness has led to the creation of a system that produces wealth by pretending to make the problem of sickness disappear. When we take a drug or give a drug to one of our animals, the original symptom may stop or change, but that's only because the burden has been shifted to another part of the body. Symptoms are just chemical reactions in the body. So all it takes to change or even stop a symptom is to change the chemistry in the body. But when we do that, those other areas of the body will be affected by the drug, and the burden is shifted to those areas, those organs. And these effects that show themselves when these other areas of the body accept the burden are called side effects. But that's a euphemism. They are not side effects. They are new symptoms. They're not a fair trade-off. They are just different symptoms. Nothing is resolved by this kind of reaction to disease because it does not address causes. Medicine doesn't like discussing causes because it's plainly obvious, or it should be to us, dog and cat owners, that if we figure out what's causing this sickness in our dogs and cats, we'll be able to remove those causes and the body will heal itself. And that is the best kept secret of medicine. The body heals itself. Since medicine is such an ineffective response to the problem of sickness, why is it our go-to? Let me just ask you that question again. Medicine is the worst response to the problem of sickness. So why is it our go-to? Why? And that leads to the third contributing factor, and that is marketing or socially sanctioned dishonesty. Marketing at its core is psychological manipulating. It's the science of lying while giving the appearance of being honest. And it's marketing in all its forms that has led dog and cat owners to think that the proper response to sickness is veterinary medicine. And here is how marketing also contributes to the problem of dog and cat sickness. It does this directly by persuading you and me, the dog and cat owning public, that industry has a monopoly on all knowledge related to dog and cat health. Nothing could be further from the truth. Marketing helps here's what marketing does. It helps this mountain of animal waste that is produced by the meat industry find a consumer base. It helps all of that useless waste that was put on only to make money for that original producer find a buyer, you and me. Marketing is what has convinced you that feeding commercial pet food is normal, natural, and healthy, and that it's the healthiest thing you can do for your dog. They truly have convinced everybody that they must rely on commercial pet food or they are risking the health of their dog. And that is an enormous lie. It's a business model. It's only a financial thing. It has nothing to do with health. It has to do with finances. It has to do with money. Okay, so those are the three basic tenets of the problem of dog and cat sickness. Dog and cat owners are realizing this, and they are doing things that they think will manage the problem or help solve the problem. So the first thing that they're doing is they're realizing that all of this pharmaceutical drug-based intervention is causing their dogs to just get different symptoms. It doesn't solve the problem at all. So what they're doing instead is holistic medicine. You know, what's wrong with that, right? Everybody thinks that if you're not going to do allopathic medicine, there's only one place to go, right? And that's holistic medicine. Well, here's the problem with holistic medicine. Number one is it follows the same ineffective model of suppression. It does this with kinder, gentler remedies like herbs and supplements and oils and homeopathics and nosodes and all kinds of products that have been developed that do exactly the same thing that drugs do, only they cause less additional harm. Let me just say that again. They cause less additional harm. They're not harmless. They just cause less additional harm. And what else is wrong with holistic medicine? It does not address the causes. It doesn't teach people how to feed their dogs. It doesn't teach people what they did wrong in order to create inadvertently this problem of dog sickness and cat sickness. And it also creates conflicting interests because practitioners, even holistic practitioners, don't work for free. They can't work for free. They make lots of money. They incur lots of bills. They may not have the big fancy equipment in their offices that the ERs do, but they still have staff that they have to pay. And their businesses are very expensive to run, very expensive. Not quite as expensive as the allopaths, but they don't pass those cost savings for not having to buy all that expensive equipment onto you. They still expect to make lots of money for the investment that they have made in their business and in their education. So what they have is, what this creates is a conflict of interests. They care primarily about their business. They care secondarily about your animals, about animals in general. They do care about animals, but they must care primarily about their business, or they're done, or they're gone. And the next thing that's wrong with holistic medicine is it is very expensive for dog and cat owners relative to what I'm going to teach people, which is self-care. All they have to do is feed the dog properly in the first place and care for the dog properly, and they're not going to incur any of these bills at all. So any money that you have to spend on a holistic vet is wasted money. It should teach you that you've made a mistake, and all you have to do is correct it. Your dog and cat will heal themselves. And, you know, that gets back to the big lie that bodies don't heal themselves. They do. The body heals itself. And the other thing that holistic medicine does is it distracts dog and cat owners from their own power. So what I'm going to teach you is the power that you have to keep your animals away from practitioners of all kinds. Even me. I don't want anybody even being dependent on me. I want to teach them this system and have them go off and experience complete independence like I have. And the next thing that's wrong with holistic medicine is it does not teach owners about proper nutrition. There are lots of holistic health practitioners out there who are learning proper nutrition, but they are not doing it in the academic system. They are doing it in the same way that you and I learn about nutrition, because nutrition in its truthful, pure form is not taught anywhere in academia. And whether you're talking about human nutrition or canine nutrition or feline nutrition, the more certifications that people have with regard to nutrition, the more they have been miseducated by a system that really basically just wants to prop up industry. It doesn't really want to produce health. It just wants to prop up industry. So everybody who practices any kind of holistic medicine, whether it's acupuncture or chiropractic care or anything, they must learn these principles of nutrition the same way that you and I do. And what that means is that you and I can be as expert in those principles or in those ideas as they are. And here's the last thing, and the big thing that people really don't understand when it comes to utilizing holistic medicine to solve the problem of dog and cat sickness. And that is when you treat a symptom with these kinder, gentler poisons, and they are because all herbs contain poisonous compounds, these pollute the bodies of dogs and cats that are already burdened. So what's producing all of this dog and cat sickness is the fact that that dogs and cats are toxic. They are polluted. They're contaminated on the inside. And it's that accumulation of waste that creates disease. Well, instead of tackling that problem of this accumulation within the internal body, what we're doing when we treat disease in any other way besides removing the cause is we are adding to the burden. We are contributing to the waste load with supplements and remedies and oils and things that can't be used by the body, which compounds the problem. So that's all of those things together are why holistic health or the holistic practitioners are not the answer. They're not the solution to the problem. And people are thinking that they are. Well, what is another thing? Another thing that people are doing to tackle the problem of dog and cat sickness is they're realizing that the commercial pet food industry is about money. It's not about health. And the word's getting out very quickly, on thanks to social media. People talk to each other about what they feed and to their animals and the kind of result that it causes. And what they are attempting to do in response to that is feed the dog homemade food. Well, there are a number of problems related to this as well, because most of these people, what they basically do, and this includes all of the experts that are teaching people how to do homemade food as well, and there are lots of vets that are doing this. I mean, there are probably thousands of people who are trying to teach people how to feed their dogs homemade food. Well, the first mistake that they make is they just try to replicate commercial food. They don't expunge the idea that they have and that's been planted in their heads that the commercial pet food industry has a monopoly on all things dog nutrition and cat nutrition related. So what they do is they mix everything in the same meal, and they think that they have to include every nutrient that a dog might need over his entire lifetime in that single meal, and they think that's what they need to do every day. So they're just replicating that big mistake that the commercial pet food industry makes. And the second mistake that they make, or the second problem that leads to mistakes, is the fact that there are very few reliable sources of truthful information out there, and there is a lot of confusion. And I'm talking about deliberate confusion because industry is a lot sneakier than we think it is, and there are people that actually are paid to create confusion among not only, all consumers, but especially among the segment of the market that owns dogs and cats. And because we are scrambling, we are making this realization that medicine's not solving the problem for us and that we can't rely on the commercial pet food industry. we are making all of this realizations, and it is producing this absolute tidal wave of a shift out there in the marketplace away from trusting industry to trying to put together some way of feeding our dogs and caring for our dogs that makes us independent of those industries. And the marketplace, the producers, the processors, the corporations all realize this, and they know that confusion works in their favor because the default, it will be to go back to relying on um, commercial pet food because at least we are told that it provides everything that a dog needs every day. And people are so, they're so fearful of deficiency, and there's a reason for that. The reason that we are so fearful of deficiency is because if we can be persuaded that all of our health problems and those of our dogs and cats are caused by some form of nutritional deficiency, that opens the door to the sale of a product. And that has led to this um, proliferation of this industry called the nutrient industry, the nutritional supplement industry. And it is enormous. It is gigantic. So there is a lot of money to be made in convincing you and I that the source of our problems is deficiency, when really the source of our problems is excess. And that's what I started discovering many years ago when I started to fix my own diet. The less you eat, the healthier you are, the more minimalist you are in your approach to your own diet and your dog and cat, the way you feed your dog and cat, the more that you are going to experience health in yourself and your dogs and cats. So the other problem with homemade food is it makes the same mistakes that industry makes. And what industry does is what they have to do is they have to create this product that they can claim fulfills all of the nutritional needs of dogs and cats every day of their lives. And they have to do that while what they're actually doing is making profitable use of all of this waste that the human food provisioning system produces, an ocean of waste that is produced by the human food producing system. So what they do is they put everything in the same meal, right? What we know about dogs, though, is that they don't do that out in nature. They don't go out and they don't go pick some blueberries and go, dig up a carrot and then go kill a rabbit and then go, eat some avocados. All of these things are included in commercial pet foods, but we don't see that when we look out in nature. What we see out in nature is that dogs pretty much stick to one food at a time, and that's what their bodies are really set up for. And here's where we have to get into a little bit of reductionism and incorporate what we know about the digestive chemistry of dogs, and that is that they are like us, monogastric. And what all that means is that they have one stomach, and the stomach and the small intestine is where the processing of food takes place. And what we know is that certain foods require certain digestive fluids, and other foods require other digestive fluids. And these digestive fluids they don't interact well. They don't play well together. They are opposing. Some are acidic and some are alkaline, because when you eat a protein, your body must produce acids in order to break that protein down. And it's the same for dogs and cats. When you eat a carbohydrate-based food, your body must produce alkaline fluids in order to break those foods down. Well, when you combine acid and alkaline, they neutralize each other, and less of the food is going to be digested. So some of that food that would otherwise be digested it'll just become waste, and it needs to go, and it will contribute to the waste load. And another factor that produces problems when it comes to people making their own dog food is that it confuses human and canine nutrition. Because what people do is they don't look out into nature and see how wild dogs are eating. What they do is they tend to feed dogs like they feed their children. And you know, for humans, we tend to still follow this model that was developed back in the 50s and 60s of you know, every food group being represented in on the plate, and that's how people tend to eat. That's how people tend to feed their children, and that's how people tend to feed their dogs. And that's a big mistake because of what I just explained about the miscombining of foods and the waste that that produces. Um, so um, when people do this, that don't allow the dog to heal from the disease that they already have. So, but in the meantime, people are still thinking that they're doing the best possible thing they can. They're feeding their dog homemade food. I see it every single day in the Facebook groups that I participate in. They um, they think they're doing the best possible thing so that when their dogs continue to be sick, what they blame for the sickness is genetics and previous vaccination damage or previous damage that was done by drugs or previous feedings. And what that does is it does not allow them to see that it was mistakes that they made within that home feeding paradigm that caused the problem. And if they do that, the ones that find me go on to experience health in their dogs. Because I'm going to tell people the mistakes that they made with this home feeding model they were using. And I'm going to show them that just correcting those mistakes allows the dog or the cat to become well. Now, going back to the very beginning of the problem of dog and cat sickness, we have been sold a perception that sickness among pets is inevitable. So many people are just choosing not to have animals. And that's the other thing that people are doing in response to this problem of dog and cat sickness. They're giving up their animals at shelters, and they are, um, a few of them, some of them are finding me because they're realizing that sickness is not inevitable, not by a long shot. And there's something they can do about that. It is expensive to have animals, whether you choose to spend your money on proper food so that they never get sick, or if you choose to spend your money on vet bills because you buy cheap pet food. Either way, it's going to cost you some money to have an animal. And it's not getting any cheaper, but we need to correct this perception that sickness is inevitable. It definitely is not inevitable. The reality is that sickness is only the failure on our parts to meet an organism's biological needs. When those needs are met, health is the predictable outcome. And as it turns out, animals are so resilient. I mean, look how they can manage on what the garbage that we feed them. I mean, typically they can make it into middle age, age 3 or 4 or 5 or later before disease starts to show up. So they are extremely resilient, just like we are. And what that means for us, it's good news because it's actually quite easy to prevent and reverse disease, even though we have this model, this economic model that's giving us substandard meats, you know, substandard foods to feed them. We can still easily, very easily prevent and reverse disease. And I'm talking about all or nearly all of disease, because truly congenital disease or disease that's out of our hands is actually very rare. It's much rarer than we've been told. So I've already covered a little bit about how we do that. We get our information from nature. We observe what wild dogs and cats eat, and that's the model that we have to try and get close to, even if it doesn't align with what we hear from these conflicted practitioners, and they are conflicted. And as it turns out, we can do pretty well just following this model. And this might be kind of surprising to people listening to this, but everything that we need to fulfill our pets' nutritional needs is available to us in any grocery store. If I can just, persuade people how simple it can be and how accessible it is, then they'll start feeding their dogs and cats properly. And that's what I want. I want dogs and cats to be healthy. Of course, I recommend that everybody read the book. Yes, of course, because what I'm introducing here is an entirely new paradigm. It's based on the principles of natural hygiene, like I mentioned, that I discovered back in 1987, which basically holds that the birthright and the natural default of every species on Earth is health. And if the biological needs of life are met, health is going to be the natural, predictable outcome. There's just no way around that. When people come into RMF, and that's what I call rotational monofeeding, RMF for short, what they're comfortable with is an entire range. Some people are already feeding homemade raw food. Some people are still feeding kibble. Some people are putting everything in a crock pot. So I have found a way to introduce RMF to all of these people in a way that makes them more comfortable, that meets them where they are. And I do this through a flow chart in the book that takes people through the how they are feeding now, what they're most comfortable with, what they want to feed their dogs, what their dogs like, their dog's preferences, their dog's um, body condition, whether they're fat or skinny. All of those things are factors in how the owner is going to be feeding or introducing their dog to RMF. But what I recommend for everybody before they start their dog on RMF is a bit of digestive rest. And what I mean by that is they really have to allow their dog's body to clean out that last meal that was fed to the dog. Their kibble, if it was kibble, it actually digests pretty slowly. So there might still be kibble in the gut. And if you're introducing something like raw meat on top of kibble, there's the chance that you're going to have a mess on your hands because dogs are not set up to eat raw meat on top of this slow digesting food that's already in the gut. So the body might choose to just eliminate the whole mess. So you can get vomiting or you can get diarrhea. But what happens when we introduce plant foods to the dog, and if your dog won't eat fruit, plant foods, when I say plant foods, I mean primarily fruit, but other plant foods can be introduced as well, like the meal that I usually use to transition a dog to RMF is cooked yams and cooked quinoa, 50-50. And when the difference between introducing or giving a dog a meal of cooked yams and quinoa on top of kibble is that it's not going to produce the putrefactive waste products that are as poisonous as those that are created by meat. When meat sits on top of kibble, it's going to produce lots of these toxic byproducts, and that's what causes the vomiting and diarrhea. It causes the body to just say, are we going to cut our losses and just get rid of this whole mess? Doesn't happen when you feed plant foods on top of kibble. So it's a fairly safe transition food. The first thing that I recommend always is a day of fasting. And people don't like to fast their dogs, and that's why I offer this option of either feeding fruit if your dog won't eat fruit, feed a meal of cooked yams and cooked quinoa. After you feed that initial meal, the next day, you will see the signature orange poop. And if you see that, when you see that, it's your all clear signal that the body is that the the colon and the intestines are clear of the previous meal. So at that point, you can feed whatever you want to. And um, it's it might sound kind of foreign to people if they're not used to feeding meat. It might be uncomfortable to handle meat. Unfortunately, our dogs and cats are carnivores, and we have to realize that. And I've been plant-based for 38 years, but I still handle meat for my dog and cat every day, and I have no problem with that. And I tell people that do have a problem with it, you can feed a plant-heavy rotation to your dog. It's perfectly acceptable to feed plants to a dog 4 or 5 days out of the week. Nobody else is going to tell you that. But you can feed nothing but plant foods for you to your dog 4 or 5 days a week, and then just feed meat the other 2 days or the other 3 days or whatever. Um, that at least allows you to the freedom of not handling meat as much as as much as you don't want to. And it allows you to patronize the meat industry less if that's a goal of yours as well. So it's attractive to this way of feeding is attractive to plant eaters. Um, but I have all of the information in the book as far as which plant foods are suitable for dogs and which ones are not. All those questions are answered for you. So when plant eaters come into, like me, come into RMF, the main questions they have are about meat. What do I feel? Is my dog supposed to eat bones? Should I feed whole bones? Should I chop the bones up? All of that is information is in the book as well. So in order for me to give you a sample menu, I have to take you through what I give my dog. And I have a very small dog. I have a 10-pound dog. But what I feed my dog is she's 8 years old now, and she's a Cocker Spaniel. She has shown herself to be pretty sensitive to fat. So I have to keep her diet very low in fat. And so what I do in order to achieve that is I feed her very low fat meats. And the lowest fat meats that you can get on the commercial market are chicken legs. These are the most accessible foods. Chicken legs, beef heart, and beef liver. So those are really the core foods, the staple foods that I use for her diet. And that's what she gets 2 or 3 times a week. She gets a chicken leg or two. And I usually take, chickens are bred to carry these enormous muscles. They carry enormous breast muscles and they carry enormous leg muscles that have absolutely no functional use to the chicken. Chickens can't run and they can't fly. So what I do is I cut a little bit of the muscle meat off of the chicken leg, and that makes a better meat to bone ratio. It makes the ratio of bone matter to meat closer to what you would find out in the wild. So I do that, and then I replace that light meat, and light meat has less nutrient density than dark meat. We know that. I replace that with beef heart. And beef heart can be kind of hard to find. You'll never find it in the meat counter. So you always have to call around and have somebody order it for you. And it's a very easy matter. I've called Safeway, I've called other regular thriftway store, regular butchers will order it for you. And it's fairly inexpensive. Back in Eastern Washington, where I live, I paid $3 a pound last time I bought it. And that's extremely cheap for what it represents because the heart muscle does not have the marbling that other lean tissue does on the body of a cow. The body can't afford to let this marbling exist in the heart because the heart's function is too important. So it's very lean. It's very lean, and the only fat that you will find on it is surface fat. And that means it's very easy to remove surface fat. Just cut it off. And what you have left is very cheap, lean meat. That's very nutrient dense. So that's part of my dog's meal. And then I give her a little chunk of liver. I don't really pay too much attention to feeding liver. And what's important about liver is it constitutes a secreting organ. And there are lots of organs in the body. Some are non-secreting, like the heart is treated as muscle meat because it doesn't secrete anything. It's just a muscle. It's just like a leg muscle, very lean leg muscle. But there are other organs in the body that do secrete hormones, and we want to include those in the diets of dogs. So it's a bit of nutritional insurance. But I feed my dog liver treats, and so she gets lots of liver in the form of dehydrated treats. So those three foods form the basis of her meals. And I give her a couple of chicken legs with some of the meat removed and all of the skin removed, and a few ounces of beef heart. And if all of this sounds very unscientific, that's perfectly okay because you know what? The only science behind commercial pet food is the science of marketing. And it is the science of marketing is the science of manipulation. It's not valid. It's taught in every university in the world, but it is the science of lying. So, yeah, I just saw the question about removing chicken skin. And if you've ever had occasion like I have, I've actually, when I see a bird out in nature that I'm able to actually, a dead bird, that I'm actually able, like I hit a bird once with my car and I took it home and I looked at it. I took the feathers off and looked at it and I wanted to see what was in there. What's there when a dog or a cat kills a bird out in nature? What's there? What do they eat? And I wanted to see that. And what I saw was very little fat and skin that is so thin that you can see through it. Translucent skin. It's just a membrane. It's not a place to store fat. Well, if you compare what you imagine, trying to create a visual here, if you compare that to what you see on a chicken, you will see just layers and layers of subcutaneous fat under the skin. So that's why we have to sacrifice the skin. Yes, out in nature, um, dogs and cats absolutely do eat the skin. We can't afford to feed the skin when we're feeding agricultural animals. And that question is answered in depth in the book. Anyway, and you might ask what I feed her on the other days, what I feed my dog on the other days when I don't feed her meat. Well, she has a couple of fasting days, and this is something that I recommend that everybody do. And it's something that replicates the wild model because dogs in the wild are not set up to eat every day. They are set up to eat big meals. Their stomachs they have great expansive capacities. And so they can eat big meals. Um, and then they go several days and sometimes much longer without eating at all. And I think it's this lack of digestive rest that our dogs get in domestic circumstances that creates a lot of the disease because even if you're going to feed kibble, if you could feed it every other day and let your dog fast every other day, as crazy as that sounds, you're going to have a dog that is a million times healthier than a dog that is kibble fed every day. And that's why, we'll see sometimes dogs living to, their teenage years and doing okay on kibble. And it's usually the people who strictly limit the amount of kibble that they feed their dogs. They'll give their dogs like a big dog, like a lab, a cup of kibble a day or whatever. If they do that, and especially if they only do it once a day, that allows the dog's body enough digestive rest to at least get rid of all of this accumulated waste or all of the waste that will otherwise accumulate if the dog has another meal coming in before they've had the opportunity to discard all of this waste through the primary organs of elimination. So, Yeah, fasting figures prominently in my dog's rotation. So that leaves a couple of plant food days per week. And for my dog, and this isn't going to be true for every dog, there are lots of options. There's just thousands of different permutations of this rotational feeding model that I'm teaching. But my form of it, my variation is a couple of fasting days, a couple of meat days, and a couple of days when my dog gets a meal of the foods that she really likes and that I have observed that she does really well on, and that is cucumbers and avocados. Cucumbers are very low in sugar. Avocados are very high in fat. And as we know, sugar and fat are not a good combination. So you don't want to feed fatty foods with sugary foods. This meal, since it includes a very high fat food, which is avocados, I think it keeps her satisfied. It keeps her weight up, even though she does fast a couple times per week. I also give her apples, but um, I try to feed the apples pretty separate from the avocados. Like I'll give her apples in the morning and avocados in the early afternoon, or her meal of avocados. Like she just had a meal yesterday of avocados and cucumbers, and I gave that to her about 5 p.m. And she had eaten apple earlier in the day, so that's fine. There's enough of a gap between the sugary food and the fat food that it's not going to cause a problem. The apple's already gone out of the stomach and small intestine. So anyway, that's what I do with my dog. It doesn't have to look like that for your dog. You could feed meat 5 days a week if you wanted to, and plant foods 1 day a week if you want to. Like if you're a rancher, if you have lots of meat, cheap meat, or if you're you raise your own animals or whatever, and that's cheaper for you than feeding plant foods. Even plant foods are getting expensive these days. You can do that too. And um, there are some other factors that relate to the dog, like what the dog likes to eat, and some financial factors, what's going to be inexpensive for you, what's going to be expensive for you. Those factors figure in too, but that's all incorporated into my flow chart that will lead you into your ideal rotation. Everything is the same. Rotational monofeeding is the name of my website, rotationalmonofeeding.com. That's the name of my Facebook group. RMF is the abbreviation, but you can reach me through the contact form on the website, which is rotationalmonofeeding.com. And I do have a private subscription community that includes weekly Q&As and one-on-one consultations on a monthly basis, where I take 3 members of the subscription group and look over what they're feeding their dogs and give suggestions. And that is as inexpensive as I can make it. It's like $10 a month, and it includes a copy of the book and a copy of the ebook. And I have a YouTube channel that's under my own name. I have like hundreds of videos under my own name on my YouTube channel, and that's Nora Lenz, Lenz. And I think that pretty much covers it. Best of luck keeping your animals healthy.